Conference Committee report on House File number 2432, an act relating to state government, providing for judiciary, public safety, correction, and government data policy.
I recognize the author, the member from...
Sorry. The report is addressed to the Honorable Lisa M. Damuth, Speaker of the House, the Honorable Bobby Joe Champion, President of the Senate. We, the undersigned conferees for House File number 2432, report that we've agreed upon the items in dispute and recommend as follows. The report is signed by 4 of the 4 members on the part of the House and 5 of the 5 members on the part of the Senate. Novotny moves that the report of the Conference Committee on House File number 2432 be adopted and that the bill be repassed as amended by the Conference Committee.
I now recognize the author of the bill, Representative Novotny, who will explain the report.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Public Safety and Judiciary Conference Committee met and we have adopted these policies, and we think that it's a responsible bill that has cut spending but still keeps priorities for both parties in place. Myself and Co-Chair Moller have both made sure that we keep funding for the Castile Training Fund in place at a reduced rate from last biennium, but it's still there. And we also have fought for the funding for crime victims advocacy programs. There are many things in this bill that are good, that have added protections for people. We've added a penalty for mandatory minimum sentencing on first-degree human trafficking, consecutive sentencing for assaulting a county jailer, first-degree arson statute of limitation increases, fentanyl exposure for children. The list goes on and on. It's a very good bill that has been worked out, and with the parameters that we were given, I think we did a very good job, and we were fair, and was happy to work with Co-Chair Moller on this, as well as Co-Chair Liebling and Scott.
Any discussion on the Conference Committee report? I recognize the member from Ramsey, Representative Moller.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to Co-Chair Novotny. It was a pleasure to work with you and the other co-chairs on this committee. And just wanted to highlight a couple of additional items as well. Many of the House provisions that we passed in both policy bills and our finance bill were combined here and did survive the conference committee and came back before you. So you will recognize many of the provisions as things that we've passed previously. A couple of things that we passed out of the committee and that didn't make it onto the floor but came over from the Senate side. I think it's important to mention the tracking of fleeing vehicles and stolen vehicles. That language was adopted by the conference committee. There was also a provision from the Senate related to AI images for child sexual abuse materials, because those are getting sadly used more frequently, and it's more difficulty to distinguish between those AI-generated images and real children. So I'm glad we were able to adopt that provision. And then just with the funding, with the agreement that the leadership reached, it only left about $14 million in discretionary funding because of covering the operating adjustments. But it was also really important to cover the operating adjustments in this area, because without doing that, DOC is finally at about 99% staffing levels for their COs. And we came woefully short in the first bill that we had with our target to be able to fund that. And so that was important. And also the BCA, their crime lab, being able to process that evidence quickly really helps the criminal justice system move in a fair way. As Co-Chair Novotny said, the Philando Castile law enforcement training dollars were very important to us and are coming back. You'll see that reflected in the numbers, as are victim services, which, you know, I would love to be able to fund them at a higher level. They are really struggling right now. These are things like domestic violence shelters, sexual assault advocates, general crime advocates, child abuse centers. And their funding has been unstable from the federal government for the last several years now, and they're experiencing even more cuts. And when I think about this, I am reminded of one of the cases I worked on where a woman was severely assaulted by her partner. And in the morning, she didn't want to wake her kids up at night. And in the morning, when they got up, she took her kids to the library. She pretended that she was going to the library with just what they had, the clothes on their backs, and that was it, to be able to escape her abuser, and was able to go to shelter. And then after she was settled in the shelter, she did report the crime, and the case was prosecuted, and he was held accountable for that. And I am sad when I think about her situation, because I wonder, with the lack of funding that we are able to provide here, and especially the cuts coming federally, and the lack of stability federally, what will happen to her and people like that. So I just want to keep that in mind. I also want to mention sort of probably the elephant in the room, which is the closure of Stillwater. That came as a surprise to all of us through at the process. And while we weren't expecting that coming back from leadership, I will say that it really is time. And this is something that's been discussed for years. There were reports in 2020, a legislative auditor, I believe, 2024, the Ombudsperson of Corrections. Many of us on the committee have toured Stillwater, and it is not sustainable. It is not sustainable both from an infrastructure standpoint and from a safety standpoint for both incarcerated people and all of the staff who work there. So again, it was a surprise that it came to us as it did this year, but it is something that has been discussed, and there is a 4-year plan for that phase out. And I know that Chair Novotny and I will be getting lots of reports from the DOC. We'll be asking a lot of questions. We will probably be having public hearings. We really want to make sure as well that they have a great plan and work in collaboration with the correctional officers and other staff there as they're implementing this closure, and also that they have a plan for the people who are incarcerated and will be moving into other facilities and making sure they get the services they need as well. So again, that came as a surprise, but it is something that has been, is needed and has been discussed for years and years. And so with all of that, Mr. Speaker, I request that members vote yes on the report. Thank you.
I recognize the member from Anoka, Representative Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, I wanted just to run through a few of the changes in the judiciary bill. From a finance perspective, not much changed. The only really addition to what we funded was we did find some money for upping the pay of these forensic examiners. Right now, there is a backlog of people waiting for competency reviews in the courts because we have a shortage of forensic examiners. And one of the reasons for that is that the Department of Human Services pays them considerably more than what they get paid in the courts. So we upped the pay for them, not to the same level yet quite of what they're getting paid through DHS, but we made some progress in that area. The funding for the 2 supervisors for the guardian ad litems is in the bill as well. And we did have some cancellations and funding from unused or unspent money from the last biennium that went into this. As far as policy, very little new policy. All of our House provisions were actually adopted. So there are a few Senate provisions that were adopted. One is regarding OFPs for financially exploited elders. That was a Senate provision. Let's see, we also had another provision that relates to guardianship if you were in a hospital and a temporary guardianship is awarded because of your health situation. We just made it really clear that that does not stick with you once you leave the hospital necessarily, that would have to be decided in a court through a process. Let's see what else. That really is just, again, to remind the body how we kind of divided up funds very limited funds that we were given. And we tried to really make it fair across the board for all the different agencies that are funded in the judiciary by giving them all according to how many employees they have. We tried to distribute the funds that we had so that we could give them maybe a little bit of bump in pay, but certainly hold them harmless for the increased cost of insurance. Members, I encourage a green vote on the concurrence. Thank you.
I recognize the member from Olmsted, Representative Liebling.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, members. So I just want to add one piece that I'd like the body to be aware of that came back from conference differently than as the bill left this floor. There's been some interest among our members here, and there have been some amendments on other bills regarding a registry of people with disabilities, and this has been a concern. So we have language in this bill that originally came from the Senate, but we did extensive work on it in conference with a lot of different stakeholders to make sure we got this right, to restrict data sharing of people with disabilities without their consent. So this is not as easy as it sounds because of state and federal law, but we hope that this provision that we're putting into law today will really help a little bit and give comfort to folks with disabilities that their data will not be shared without their consent. So I would urge adoption of the committee report.
Is there any further discussion on the adoption of the committee report? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion to adopt the conference committee report on House File 2432, say aye. Those opposed say nay. The motion prevails. The clerk will give the bill its third reading.
Third reading, House File Number 2432, as amended by conference.
Third reading as amended by conference. Any further discussion? I recognize the member from Dakota, Representative Witty.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, I'd like to thank all the chairs, Novotny, Moller, Liebling, and Scott for your work on this. Team House did a really good job on this bill, and I think even the work that we did in the committee allowed us to get to this point. Some of the things I wanted to highlight was the $250,000 that's appropriated for the supplemental nonprofit security grants. I think that will help out in a lot of our different communities. Also, the DOC required to have Narcan. And I think this will be important because it administers to people who overdose in our prisons. And then the other one, we are asked to carry a provision on use of drones by law enforcement, which I think is an effective tool that helps out our agencies, and they request it, and we expand at that. And then the last one, the missing and endangered person. It adds people with diagnosed with dementia, Alzheimer's, traumatic brain injury, and also autism. And we tried to do that before, and we finally got it through, so thank you, Representative Rehar, on that. And it allows us to get that information out to law enforcement so our loved ones can be hopefully found safe and quickly. And then I'm going to talk about the Philando Castillo money. When we first had that cut, it was devastating. And we heard from different groups, from law enforcement, but we also heard from Valerie Castillo and how important it meant for the legacy of her son. And I don't know if all you know, she was my guest at the State of the State. And a lot of people came up and said hi. And we're probably from two different worlds sometimes. We're fighting for the same thing, for good in our community. And we passed out here $5.5 million each year. I think the Senate had one or two, and we still came up with $10 million, because that is what we do. We work together, and I was very proud. Valerie did a lot of good work, and at the end of the State of the State, we went outside. I thanked her. I got to know her better. I got to know her brother, Clarence. and it was because we were working together to make our communities better and help make sure our police officers are trained. And the touching moment for me was when we were saying goodbye and Valerie looked at me and said, "Can I get a hug?" It broke my heart. So thank you guys for all this good work, and I hope you all can vote green today. Thank you.
I recognize a member from Washington, Representative Hill.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I stand conflicted here today on a public safety bill. Public safety bills are things that I am very proud to vote for. It is oftentimes a foregone conclusion that I'm going to support a public safety bill. But the very late inclusion of the provision to close the correctional facility at Stillwater is going to be difficult for the community I represent and its residents, in particular the workers who staff that facility. The reason why I'm so conflicted is on several occasions I've had the opportunity to tour and connect with those who both live and serve at that facility. And there is no question that this facility needs to be retired. Okay. The conditions are seriously in deterioration, and I'm talking about the physical conditions. I'm talking about the conditions where human beings are housed. For those of you who have been on that tour and who have been up to the 4th tier during the summertime months, it's not okay. I also want to talk about the conditions that the workers, the brave men and women who staff that facility, our correctional officers, face. Their safety is of paramount importance, and we need to make sure that we do everything for each one of them, every last one of them. And so as I've struggled in real time to accept this change, several things come to mind. And forgive me, I am going to take another 90 seconds or here to walk through them. Number one, and there's only 4, so I'm not going to keep you here long. Number one is the needs of those who are housed there, our IPs that are housed at the Stillwater Correctional Facility. As this transition unfolds, we need to make sure that their humanity, their safety, and the human connection is what gets me emotional here. All those things need to be respected. Okay? This is more than 1,200 of our Minnesota residents. These are 1,200 human beings whose lives are going to be impacted. And that has to be the first part of the equation. Secondly, we're talking about our workers. Their lives are going to be greatly interrupted and impacted. We need to make sure that we get this process right. On an incredibly minuscule scale, I went through a change that is not apples to apples comparison to this, but served in a union leadership role when 3 of our schools were consolidated. The lives that we were talking about impacting were certainly our students first, but then the 70 employees that staffed those schools. That process took 2 years, 2 years to untangle. I'm going to move ahead to number 2 is our workers and the 580 workers that staff Stillwater Correctional Facility. Now our number is approaching 1,800 people's lives who are going to be greatly impacted. My concern also has to do with number 3, the facility, and what's going to happen to it and how quickly they can remove that facility. And number 4, the site. How can we look ahead and begin a process that includes all voices that make sure that that site is used for good for the region as it has been? In spite of the idea of a aging prison being on that site, I do believe that good things have happened there and good outcomes have come out of that facility. I mentioned before that I've been through there twice. I visited with the warden on a regular basis and the commissioner. I understand the idea that this facility is outdated. And for those who haven't taken the walk, I refer to the movie The Shawshank Redemption, and I ask people if they've seen it. And of course, since it's on a loop on television, everybody has. And then I break the news to them. This facility looks older than that. It's in greater disrepair than that facility. And so a couple of things need to be said before I hang up the mic here. Number one, I want to thank our workers, the folks who staff that facility and do incredible work every day and toe the line every day. In spite of the shortages, in spite of the overtime that they are required to work to make that place tick, they're doing incredible and heroic work. And I want to make sure that I also connect this last idea. It's important, but not maybe as important as those other ideas. This facility and the fact that Stillwater has housed it has an interesting dichotomy in the soul of many of the people that I represent. And that dichotomy is that, well, I often hear about concerns about having IPs housed in our community. I also hear just as many people talk about the pride and the identity that our communities have wrapped into them, embedded into them, threaded into them, woven into them. And so I stand before you very conflicted, and I wanted to make sure that folks, before they vote on this bill, understand those elements. So thank you, Mr. Speaker and members, for indulging me.
I recognize the member from Ramsey, Representative Finke.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I want to start by thanking Representative Hill for your comments. Before I start, I want to say that I recognize the complexity and the difficulty that comes with shutting down a place that is such an important part of a community, right? It is a place where people work and people live, and it will have a great deal of impact on the area. And before I speak about Stillwater Prison, I just want everyone who's involved in the union and in the work side of this to know that these are very difficult decisions, and I see and hear and understand that. I also want to say thank God for the closure of Stillwater Prison. In the previous biennium, I carried legislation to create a task force on the closure of our aging prison facilities. And my work on this issue goes back before my time here. It's a very important issue, and I think that we just should take a minute to recognize the human rights victory that is the impending closure of Stillwater Prison. It was constructed in 1914. The first prison in Stillwater was actually constructed in 1858, and that one actually only lasted about 55 years before the conditions got so bad that they couldn't continue to house people in it. So they built a new one, and now it's 110 years later, and the conditions have gotten so rough and so inhumane that pretty much everyone agrees we should not continue to house people in the building. And when we all come here with our shining stars, mine is the work of human and civil rights, right? I'm here first and foremost to look after the human rights of those who need us most to care for them. And I also have visited Stillwater, and I have also spent time with the individuals who live there, our neighbors, our future neighbors. And I have seen it in the summer, and I have seen it in its loudest and hottest. And it is truly the kind of place that the people that we are in charge of, that we are responsible for their lives, which is people who are incarcerated in Minnesota's prisons. We should not be responsibly housing anybody in such a place. So I'm very grateful to the governor and our legislative leaders. I did not expect this to come. And I know that it is complicated. And often when you have sought a goal, that is very difficult and takes years and years and years to achieve, and then you achieve it, right? There's a little bit of like the dog catching the car. It's terrifying and it's difficult and there's hard questions to answer and people have to rearrange a great deal of real hard decisions to make it happen. But that doesn't mean the thing that is happening is not good. So one of the ways that we are going to make this happen is that we pass the MRRA in 2023, which is the Rehabilitation and Reinvestment Act. And when we passed the MRRA, we said as a state, we don't want to look any longer at the long-term mass incarceration and warehousing of human bodies as the solution to the problem of crime in the state of Minnesota. Everywhere you look, you know, mass incarceration doesn't solve the problem that we are trying to solve. And the MRRA is an investment in understanding that we need to do something different than warehouse people in falling facilities. I'm confident that the language that is in the bill is going to make sure it is done in a humane way. The 4-year phase out we will find the beds in other facilities plus releases under the MRRA to ensure that we are not recreating the problem of overcrowding, that we are not recreating the problem of a lack of space. In 2018, the American, let me get the right name, American Correctional Association said that Stillwater lacked adequate space and plumbing to humanely house the residents who were forced to share rooms. We can look at the complaints, and I'm not going to go through all of them, but there has been holdouts because the water runs brown. There have been holdouts because the temperatures are sauna-style temperatures, no ice, few showers, people living in cramped rooms at 110 degrees or more. We don't put people into those living conditions and say that we are proud of how we are housing our residents. It's falling literally on the heads of the people who live and work there. And when I had my conversation with DOC about how they want to fix it, they said at least $160 million, that was 2 years ago, to get this place up to a livable environment to house people. We don't want to put $160 million, which is why we haven't. I'm sure it's more than that now. So I just want to say that I'm very grateful, even though there will be difficult times to come, that this solution has been found. We judge societies not by how they treat the people that they love, but how they treat the people that they do not want around, right? The least of these. The people we put in prison, their lives are how we should be judged. How do we treat the least of these? Everybody loves the people we love. How do we house the people we have rejected? This is a step forward. I'm really proud of the state of Minnesota for recognizing this place needs to go. And please, please, let's really take a look. I appreciate, actually, one last thing. I really appreciate Chair Novotny for his commitment to shutting down Stillwater. That's something that we share. It's something that he's said repeatedly. And I just want to say that without his support of closing Stillwater, I don't think this would have happened. So thank you for that. We may not think we need to do it for the same reasons, but we got to a good outcome anyways. So please, as we go forward in this state, let's continue to invest in a humane, dignified future for all of our neighbors and never let something like Stillwater happen again.
I recognize the member from Olmsted, Representative Liebling.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Mr. Speaker, and members. I'm going to shift the conversation quite a bit away from the closure of Stillwater. I just wanted to make some general comments about our bill and my service this year as co-chair of the Judiciary Committee. And I think Representative Witty used the term team house. And I like that because we really did function, the four co-chairs, Judiciary and Public Safety, I think we did really function as team house. And You know, given the divisive issues that we confront and the divisive times we live in, I think that was quite something. And I just want to express my appreciation. And all of our staff, partisan and nonpartisan, were truly wonderful to work with. I do want to say, though, I have some real concern about the process of this bill from the judiciary point of view. We all know, we all took an oath to defend our Constitution, and we all understand here in this body that there are 3 independent branches of government. In this state, I think we would all agree, I hope we would all agree, that we're blessed to have an excellent judiciary that does maintain its independence. I think it is mindful about intruding on the prerogatives of the other branches, but it also has the courage to step in to uphold the rule of law when that is necessary. That is not something to take lightly, because in our nation today, we are seeing in real time how important it is that each branch is independent of the others. We have an authoritarian occupying the executive branch federally, and we have a legislative branch federally that is complicit. And a strong and independent judiciary is the last check against tyranny. And this can happen in states as well. We have the same structure. The Judiciary and Civil Law Committee has a special responsibility to fund our independent judicial branch. The independent judicial branch is not a discretionary program like much of what we deal with here in this House and in the legislature. Just as surely as this legislature must be funded for our democracy to continue, the judicial branch must be funded. Appropriately, the judicial branch was not at the negotiating table when leaders from the other 2 branches decided what Minnesota's budget will fund for the next couple of biennia. However, those leaders also have a special responsibility to listen to and consider the budget request of the judicial branch. None of us are required to give the judicial branch everything it asks for, but we certainly should listen and consider their requests. And I'm sorry to report to you that when our leaders made their decisions, that did not happen. That did not happen. And so what you have before you is a bill that has many good things in it, and some of them you've heard about today, and I'm very proud of our work together. However, we are bringing you a conference report that underfunds the judicial branch. That underfunds the judicial branch. We funded operating adjustments to judicial staff at a level that would support less than a 1% raise, and there is no increase at all in this bill for judicial salaries for the next 2 years, none at all. So this is, there are some mixed feelings about this bill, as I heard from Representative Hill. There are mixed feelings. I have mixed feelings about it too because of the low level of funding. And, but we did what we could. We tried to be fair among the agencies that we were funding. But I think that Chair Scott and I both recognize that the judiciary was not treated as it should have been in this process, and we regret that. So I just want to again close by thanking those who worked on this conference committee. Our Senate partners also were very good. We had a lot of meetings. We had quite a few public meetings. We worked together very well on a lot of the language. I don't sit on the Public Safety Committee, but I was really felt very privileged to be part of the conversations with the public safety folks as well, and I think the 4 of us worked really well together, and I feel very confident that this bill is as good a bill as it could be, and I urge members to vote for it. Thank you.
I recognize the member from Anoka, Representative Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Representative Liebling, for those words. And I rise just to say 2 things. One, the first time I spoke, I failed to let you know that one of the things that we funded was $4 million in one-time funding to the courts for our justice partner access. And this is something that's been asked for, requested by those that work with the judicial system. Right now, they pretty much have to come down to the courthouse and get the documentations. This money will hopefully allow the courts to put something that's automated so people can possibly pay an annual fee or something like that to have access to those court documents so they're not making a trip to the local courthouses. The other thing I wanted to do, and I failed to do this when the bill passed off the House the first time, and that was to thank by name our staff on the Judiciary and Civil Law Committee. And I just want to thank the CAs from both parties, Marissa Mantefel for the Republican side, Anna Borderdine on the Democrat side, our CLAs Liam Edgar and Krista Niederhofer, I hope I didn't wreck her name too badly, researchers for the Republicans, Aaron Bursey, and for the Democrats, Zach Meinertz, nonpartisan staff, of course, Nathan Hopkins, Mary Davis, Ben Johnson, and fiscal staff John Walls. And then last but not least, our faithful pages, Ping and Eric, that were just did such a great job in our committee this year. So very thankful for all the great staff that we have. And I just want to say to the body as well, it was a pleasure to work in this conference committee with even the Senate. Yes, Senator Latz is standing at the back of the room, but but all the House and the Senate folks, we just worked really diligently and well together. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Is there any further discussion to the bill? I recognize the author of the bill, the member from Sherburne, Representative Novotny.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. When the session first started, we had conversations with the fiscal staff, and we asked them with the prospect of going in special session and having a shutdown to start doing bare bones, keep the light on budget. And in the end, that's basically what we have, is a bare bones, keep the lights on public safety budget. As Chair Moller said, there were many things that had passed committees and made it into the House version that were simply too expensive to keep because of the cost that would be, like an increased penalty for dangerous fleeing in a motor vehicle and other things like that. This is as reasonable a bill as we could get, and still do everything we can to keep the state of Minnesota safe. The first responsibility that the state has, that's to public safety. And I ask for your green vote. Thank you.
Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll. The clerk will call the name of the member voting remotely.
Kozlowski.
Go ahead. Fish.
Kozlowski.
One more time.
Votes yes.
Kozlowski votes aye.
The clerk will close the roll. There being 131 yeas and 3 nays, the bill is repassed as amended by conference and its title agreed to.